Facebook is willing to take every penny. Twitter doesn't want any of that dirty money. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, quite a different approach. The social media giants Facebook and Twitter have, in recent days, taken a completely opposite approach to how to deal with political advertising. Facebook essentially has said, we're going to take any political ads from anywhere, and we are not going to exercise any kind of editorial control. So if people exercise their right to spread disinformation, fake news, make up stuff, that's not our business. Twitter, on the other hand, Jack Dorsey from Twitter has said that because of that kind of thing, they're not going to take any political advertisements. And there's an interesting quote here that Dorsey used when he said this. He says, "We believe political message reach should be earned, not bought." Bill, it seems interesting to me because I would bet that Twitter is still taking money from other kinds of advertising for products and services. Don't you think that, messages about Tide laundry detergent should be earned and not bought?
It's interesting that the guy whose entire model is social networking basically is saying, I'm talking about Twitter. We don't believe that advertising should be, that things should be bought or paid for. You should have to earn your audience by starting a Twitter account and diligently building up your membership. I'll tell you the honest reaction, Scotty, is that if I believed Facebook when they say we're going to take everything and just display it true or not, if I believe that, which I don't, then I would say this is one of the grand examples of how a really brilliant society actually is supposed to function. This guy owns this company. It's his, and it's his property. And he says, I feel about this morally, and this is the way I'm going to run my business. And another guy says, I'm Mark Zuckerberg, and I am the spawn of the devil, and I'm going to take all the money there is. But seriously, this is what a free market does, is it gives you the opportunity not only to make money, but it gives you the opportunity, in fact, it is inevitable that it will take on the ethics of either the founder, the CEO, or the board. The company will take on their ethics, good or bad. And I find it really refreshing that two giant companies that are more or less in the same media spin cycle are taking completely different approaches to this.
Bill, it's interesting because conservatives have been outraged at the fact that Twitter is not going to take political ads, and they're crying censorship. Meanwhile, progressives and liberals are decrying the fostering of hate speech on Facebook. So it doesn't seem, I don't know whether progressives seem to think that paid advertising on Twitter is the conservative meat and potatoes. It's really being effective. Apparently conservatives believe that. Do you think there's a difference in how these social media platforms affect people based on partisan affiliation?
Here's what's great about logic. If person A and person B have different positions, then we significantly opposing positions, then we can say the following: either A is right and B is wrong, or B is right and A is wrong, or both A and B are wrong, but they can't both be right. And so there we are in category C. I think they're both wrong. I think the conservatives would have a case, a genuine case for real outrage if it turned out that Twitter was only accepting advertising from progressive candidates. But if it's not accepting it from anybody, that to me seems like a perfectly reasonable decision and a perfectly fair one. So I think that the conservative position on Twitter censoring speech is I just don't think there's grounds for it. And likewise, I think the progressives are wrong too. This idea that we're just going to, look, progressivism is very simple, really. It is extremely simple. Anything that doesn't agree with you and your agenda has to be demonized. Yeah, sure, why not? Has to be demonized, and it has to be done in an extremely personal way. The reason progressivism has gotten as far as it has, and by the way, I was driving into work this morning and I realized the culture war is over and we've won. And I'll elaborate on that shortly in another segment. But progressives have made it their entire modus operandi. That means kind of habit for those of you who are on the, okay, boomer.
This is their way of doing things.
Yeah. So So basically what they say is if it's something I don't agree with, then it's hate speech. And I was listening to a really good analysis by Paul Joseph Watson on Joker, on how every major outlet, on the mainstream media was just lambasting this movie, saying you can't go. The murder is so graphic and so violent, doing everything they could. The critic scores versus the audience scores. Joker's a masterpiece. And Joker basically takes the position that mass shooters or criminal homicides are the result of people who have been broken either through childhood abuse or whatever and are mentally ill. It's not just that there's a gun happens to be lying on the thing. So the reason I bring that up is because once they realized that Joker was not taking their party line, then Joker had to be demonized. It's racist. It's super violent. We're going to have to station cops in the movie theaters because likely if somebody sees this movie, they're just going to pull out revolvers and just gun the place down. So that's how they function. And so when they say that this is not fair because if you allow conservatives to have messaging time on Facebook, that could lead to either fake news or hate speech. That's how they deal with rational debate, is they don't deal with it.
Well, this
so
is
both sides
specifically
are
what
wrong.
the Biden campaign has said, by the way.
Good.
The Biden campaign has blasted Facebook for refusing to remove a Trump campaign ad that made allegedly false claims about Joe Biden. Senator Elizabeth Warren, also a presidential candidate in the Democratic Party, has called Facebook disinformation for profit.
Where are your gods now, Mark Zuckerberg? Yeah, it's the system that can never win. Progressivism can't win. I realized that over the course of the last several months or a year or two, and then driving into work, it just became crystal clear. It can't win. It hasn't won. It's lost.
Well, is Zuckerberg's position in this basically like Mother Teresa when reportedly
No, it's nothing like Mother Teresa.
Well, Mother Teresa was reportedly asked about her tendency to accept money from whoever would give money so that she could do her ministry, and she basically said, "Hey, look, if a mafioso gives me some money, I'm going to take that evil money and use it for something good." So Zuckerberg is basically saying, I don't care, what you're saying, what your political messaging is. Anybody can say anything on Facebook, but we're going to take that money and use it for the good of the world.
Here's the teeny tiny distinction between these two cases. Mother Teresa worked in appalling conditions, side by side with actual lepers, and worked in an environment where even a $5 bill could make a fundamental difference in several people's lives. For her to say that I'm going to take whatever you want to call it, evil money, blood money, or whatever, and do good with it, she's absolutely correct.
Well, Mark Zuckerberg's employees work in appalling conditions.
They do. They do. And they ought to think about changing their religion. But in any event, when you try to equate that with a man who we just talked about not too long ago, gets up on stage in front of his hard work and demoralized employees and say, I've got too much money. I'm worth $41 billion. What do I do with the rest of it? I just don't know. Those are not morally equivalent positions. If you give money to Mother Teresa, no matter where it comes from, it will do actual good. And if you give money to Mark Zuckerberg, no matter where it comes from, it will do actual harm. And not just harm in terms of him getting richer. It'll do harm in terms of the censorship that we've been seeing the whole time, and the idea that Silicon Valley, the Democratic Party, and the news media and the Hollywood elites are going to tell all the rest of us how we should live and vote. And if it turns out we make a mistake in the voting booths, then they will get together and work hard to make sure that mistake that we made is corrected by our knowing and loving betters who care nothing about our personal except our personal happiness and well-being.
Now, I can see how Zuckerberg's position might be to his benefit. In essence, if you say, look, we're not going to be the gatekeeper for truth or falseness in these political advertisements, we're just going to cash the checks. Well, then obviously he's bringing in revenue. That makes sense for his shareholders and for his own personal wealth. What doesn't make as much sense is Jack Dorsey's position over at Twitter, who's not only saying, by the way, and I didn't give the full scope of this, he's not just saying we're not going to take political ads for the the U.S. presidential race or for U.S. political races, he's not taking political ads anywhere. And in the not too distant past, Twitter banned state-run media outlets. So, for example, China can't buy ads on Twitter to advance their effort to crush the Hong Kong liberation movement.
MSNBC's been pulled too, presumably.
How does this, and we're just talking about paid ads here. We're not talking about people's ability to use the platform itself like you suggested earlier. How does this cutting off of that income stream, which Dorsey acknowledges is not a big part of their income, but how does this cutting that off help Twitter?
Oh my God, man. I mean, you heard it. You heard him put his cards on the table in his statement. He basically said, well, first of all, as you admit, and as it seems obvious, Facebook makes a lot more money on ad revenues. Ads are certainly more prominent on Facebook than they are on Twitter. And what the owner of Twitter basically said was, no. Twitter users are far, far above this kind of thing. If you want an audience on Twitter, you're going to have to earn it. You don't get to buy it. Now, what message does that send to you if you're a Twitter user or a Twitter aspirant or somebody who's never heard the word Twitter and decides, my God, I better get to work?
So you're saying there's almost two elements here. Number one is the virtue signaling of saying we're not going to be involved in the hate speech business, the disinformation for profit, as Betsy Warren would say. And number two is that if you are a corporate advertiser, consumer or B2B advertiser, that your ads are going to be in an atmosphere of other advertising that is not polluted by the political division that's tearing our country apart.
I think a better way to look at Twitter's position on this is to say, since ad revenue is not our primary source of revenue, what we're going to do is we're going to do some virtue signaling, as you pointed out. And this is a wise financial decision because the increase in the growth of the Twitter net and the increase in the morale and the increase in enthusiasm among people who tend to use Twitter is well worth, in terms of downstream dollars, well worth whatever dollars we may not have gotten on the ad revenues. Reminds me a little bit of a scene in Heaven Can Wait, where Warren Beatty comes back and he's suddenly a very important guy, and I think it was that movie where he was talking about dolphins and being killed with tuna nets and stuff, and he said, couldn't we pay a few cents more per can to buy food that doesn't have a fish that can think? Something close to that. And so what he's doing is he's basically saying, look, why don't you pay a few pennies more for a better quality product, for something you can feel good about, something you can be comfortable about morally? And that's what Twitter's doing, is they're saying we're far, far above all of this. It's a form, actually, of camouflaging whatever manipulation they are doing and whatever other advertising they're doing. It's a form of camouflaging it by wrapping it in this cloak of virtue, and then signaling your virtue to everybody else. So I think in both cases, they're making smart decisions. I think criticisms of both cases are not based on fact. And just for my own personal take on it, I would just like to say a pox on both their houses.
Well, and then Rush Limbaugh created a parody ad that had a kid complaining about how the tuna didn't have that great taste of porpoise anymore.
Yeah, it's missing that blubbery mammally taste.
I will direct our viewers and listeners right now to refer to an episode we just did within the last week or so under the headline, "Study says that a tiny fraction of Twitter users do the vast majority of political tweets." That would be a good companion episode to this one.
Absolutely.
I would also let you know that our friends over at the Patriot Post, America's News Digest, are doing a fantastic job of covering not only the news of the day, but the broader movements and ideas that really shape this republic and frankly, the world. And we refer you to them as well. In the description below, you'll see a link to the Patriot Post. Thanks to those folks there. But the folks at BillWhittle.com who have joined to become members are the ones who are the heart and soul of this operation. Not only do they pay for the production of these episodes, but they also run their own member blog that is exclusive to them. They have a new forum feature. They can exchange private messages because of our member directory. They have threaded comments, and they're just really engaged in that kind of civil dialogue that so many people complain that you can't find on social media at any price. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.